following is a conversation between myself and a Dr. Will Shaw. So Will is a founder of a business called Golf Insider UK. This is his website, yes, golfinsideruk.com. And to try to summarize it myself, his business is about providing advice, evidence-based advice about how to structure your practice and your training in order to improve at golf. And his business has evolved into also providing a product around how to record and track your golf game, and also he provides insights into new technologies and equipment, and specific for different stages in your golf game and for different aspects of your golf game. So it's interesting. Will's story is very interesting. He started the business during his PhD that he did at the University of Leeds. He also currently lectures in sports science related topics at the Leeds University. And the story is interesting because he also talks about some of his early experiences in starting startups, which are very insightful. And he also talks about some of his current new endeavors as well. So and it's interesting to go through just some of the things that come up during the interview. So his PhD was done at the University of Leeds, and he does mention that he's starting a new startup in providing information in sports sciences. So he's interested in starting a website platform that provides science-based advice across different topics in exercise and sports science. And in order to start this, he actually reached out to a university incubator called Spark at Leeds, the University of Leeds. And it's very similar to the innovation precinct at Swinburne University of Technology. So it's just another example of how an individual is interested to start a new business or company, and he's done this by tapping into resources that are available at a university that he's currently affiliated with. And it's certainly something that you could also do yourselves if this is something that's interesting. So Will is very generous with his time in this interview, and he also covers a lot of interesting topics and aspects of his business model. So it's a fantastic interview. So having said all that, please enjoy. All right, so I'm recording now, Will. So, well, firstly, thanks a lot for agreeing to talk with me and also with my students. We really appreciate it, the chance to talk to people such as yourself who've started to push into starting your own business in the exercise sports science sector. I think a good place to start with these conversations is if I just give a bit of a background of the course and the students, so we get a sense of the audience that we're talking to, yeah. And then that'll give us a framework, I think, for our conversation. So I'm a lecturer at Swinburne University of Technology, and one of the courses that I teach it's called Industry Project. And this is the students in this core unit are third year exercise and sports science students. I don't know what the equivalent is yet in the UK, but I'm sure you have an equivalent type of course as well. Yeah. So the goal of the unit is that they would take an existing product or service solution and then try to apply it in the sport and exercise sector. So okay. Yeah. So they're trying to find a market or people with a particular problem that they can solve with that product or service. Yeah. Okay. Nice. And then and then they'll also go through a phase of trying to validate, because of course all of whether or not they have a good solution is typically based on a whole set of assumptions, and then they'll try to validate by trying to do some interviews with potential customers and that sort of thing. Yeah. And then it culminates in a kind of pitch to investors. So that's yeah. It's a funny. I'm happy to if you're interested, I'm happy to share with you the assessment they do as well. So kind of fun.
I can't remember the famous school in America where a lot of Airbnb and Uber came through, but that's essentially it, isn't it? It's this Yeah, Y Combinator, that's it.
Y
It's that same
Combinator.
sort of process. Yeah. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, I use there's some nice material at MIT as well. Actually, I've got the book here. I kind of model the course a bit off this one book by Bill O'Leary.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, he's got an MIT course as well, and so it's all about really how to start a startup.
Fantastic.
And yeah. So that's kind of what they're the sort of issues and that level of I guess phase in a business that the students are trying to grapple with. And so that's the course and the students. And so you've actually got a background as well in exercise sports science, and you've also been lecturing at a university as well. So that's really interesting. So and you've also started a business now as well. So just makes you a perfect candidate for us to
tick all the boxes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess a good place to start to just ask you a question is, so there's 3 phases to what we'll talk about. So the first is I'll ask you about your background and so your education and your interests and things like that. And then we'll talk about your business and then we'll end up with hopefully with some advice or some kernels of wisdom for the students going forward. So yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry?
I'll do my best on the first 2.
Yeah. Well, let's see how we go. Well, actually, I find typically it's like a summary actually of everything we talk about becomes the advice. So yeah. Please, Will, introduce yourself and tell us about, perhaps you could even start with when you first started your education, what you started with, and sort of your career trajectory is a good way to, I think it would be interesting to hear from you. Yeah.
Yeah, no, happily. I started education late, I think, is that. So if we go all the way back, I was a golf pro, so played professionally, coached, and that was really what I wanted to do. Didn't quite make it playing, but I was doing quite well coaching. And in my early 20s, there's a little place called Suffolk in England, coaching, and it's going well. I was coaching county players, lots of members, a couple of other professionals. But I was standing on the range and I just thought, I don't know how to do this better. And I was okay. People kept coming back. They were getting better. But that essentially led me to decide to go off and do a top-up degree on top of, I had a foundation degree, and then a master's, really exploring skill acquisition. So yeah, I went off to Leeds Beckett, did a top-up degree, which was awesome, with supposed elite athletes who were transitioning. So there was myself, there was ex-rugby players, footballers, and all of us sat in a classroom talking theory, which was brilliant. Okay. And then I did a PhD, a master's in sports biomechanics and psychology, doing my best to learn around skill acquisition and movement.
So yeah, I'm curious. Tell me about this top-up degree. So is it so why were you in the room with ex-athletes? Is that part of the? Yeah, how is that constructed?
Supposedly, I fitted as a golf professional. It was one of those that Leeds Met or Leeds Beckett, as it is now. Yeah. They had really good history of elite sport and supporting elite athletes who would be training at the campus. And it was this one thing where they realized a lot of their athletes would come do, say, a foundation degree, and then maybe transition off into elite sport, and that they had a top-up year. So I was really lucky to get in that top-up year.
Okay.
So that was essentially
what's special about the top-up? I still don't quite grasp it. Why?
It's essentially that you've done enough modules for the first 2 years. In my case, 3 years distance learning, and then you need a little bit more to say, right, it's a full degree. So it's a bit of a weird path.
Okay, nice. And so that was interesting for you because in part because of the people that were part of that top-up.
Oh, yeah. It was number one, talking about these things, which for me were fascinating as an athlete, because I'd experience of anxiety in sport, and I'd had all these questions around, say, biomechanics and optimal technique. And so having the lecturers and the content was great, but then having people from all these different sports disciplines just gave me such an interesting perspective on my own sport. And I think that's something as athletes and as coaches we don't get, because we're sort of constrained to our own sport a lot of the time.
Okay. Okay. So you're some more very, very sport specific focused is kind of what you're at in that kind of context, and this let you kind of look at things from different angles. Way.
Yeah, it was fascinating.
What got you? So you said you then did a master's, and you were interested in skill-ac and biomechanics. What got you interested in that? It was obviously, I guess it was the coaching, was it? The connection?
Partly coaching, and golf's a very technical sport. But what I realized is, well, if I want to understand learning and how we control movement, essentially I need to measure it. I'd never done biomechanics in my life, and a lot of my classmates were like, "You're mental. You're taking up biomechanics for the first time at masters." But for me, it wasn't about trying to get perfect marks. It was just, can I learn as much useful stuff as possible?
Yep.
And that was really my approach the whole way through. So even at undergrad, I'd learn sports psych, and I think, right, can I turn this into a 6-week coaching program at home? And so when I was doing my masters, it became very clear that I need to get a lot better at measuring movement, quantifying movement, and telling athletes if they got better or why their performance had changed. So that's what got me interested in there. And you'll be pleased to hear I had a biomechanist who was big into his climbing, did a PhD in climbing biomechanics, Chris Lowe, and he was phenomenal. Just one of those exceptional academics. I'm still good friends with him. He's very bright and very stubborn, but we have some great arguments around human movement and these sort of interesting questions that we get to debate as academics.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so you so still a mentor.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
or maybe you're mentoring him at this point. I don't know.
Definitely not. No. that was essentially the switch where I think I suddenly started going into this sort of journey of entrepreneurship. So I can sort of go into that if you want now. So
yeah, that's a good transition. So you've done a master's, and then you transition to entrepreneurship. Is that?
The next 8 years of my life are very hazy and a hodgepodge of activities. So in the next 7 years, in some capacity, I was lecturing part-time at 2 universities, did a part-time PhD, started up an app business, was doing some self-employed work, and I'll do my best to explain that blend. But really, at this point, I look back at myself as a professional golfer, and I got my chipping and putting up to a tour level, and it was good enough. But my longer game was just not good enough. It was good, but I couldn't compete. And when I look back at it, I just saw that practice structures and skill acquisition was a big part of the puzzle I was missing. And I looked at my training, I suppose, with the information I had now, and I realized, I wish I'd done this, or I wish I'd done that. So essentially, I reached out to a friend of a friend and someone that had played for England as a golfer, had turned pro and not had much success, and just said, "Look, can I help you? Do you want to have a chat? Because I think I may have some ideas that may be useful." And so I'd written down some questions like this interview and talked to him. And in my idea, I had this framework. And I think after about 40 minutes, he just goes, I've wasted the last 3 years of my life, haven't I? I was like, no, you haven't. But it became very apparent that a lot of these sort of so-called, I suppose, elite professionals, they were sort of low-level professionals, just didn't have the basics of practice structure. And predominantly because in golf, you don't have a coach following you around doing all of your practice structures. You may see them once a month and then you go and practice. So that was my first, I suppose, iteration of what I do now at golf inside the UK. But it was really just using sports science and specifically skill acquisition to try and help golfers get better.
Okay. So and so just to unpack, so this sort of, I guess, problem that you've identified is almost the kernel of your business. And it's sort of informed by perhaps your own sort of personal experience, and then also going to university and hearing these perhaps different ways of doing things, maybe. And for sure, correct me if I'm wrong. And then the practice structure. So one of the insights with motor learning, it's interesting. There's different theoretical frameworks for explaining learning, and related to that is perhaps different ways to facilitate learning. So ways of applying those frameworks. Yeah. And is that what you kind of found was something that was a problem, I guess, or a gap in golf.
Yeah. And I would say as much as we think of skill acquisition most of the time as something really fancy and high level, I'd say the work that I still do with elite professionals today is just 80% common sense and 20% some theory. So the basics is just looking at performance and just saying, right, what are the factors that are most important to scoring, and what's the factors that are maybe weaknesses? And then can we build a practice structure that targets these, gives you good feedback, and is relatively challenging? And that's it. Now, there's all this fancy stuff, and I think practice variability is probably the poster child of skill acquisition. Everyone goes to it.
Yeah.
You're getting down into the weeds. Most professionals that I've worked with just don't have the basics in place. So that was really my role, is just to say, look, let's sit down, let's come up with a real basic plan. The skill acquisition part is quite important, but I think part of it is just giving the athlete direction. Okay. And just saying, like, look, this is how you're going to get better, and don't worry about what you're doing every day. Just get these core tasks done each week. That was quite a lot of, I think, stress offloaded off the athlete. I think they had a plan.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, like, and okay, so there's a you're able to introduce a framework and a way of, I suppose, helping structure practice and what to focus on. And it sounds like a bit about, like, what how do we do things in our game which represent, I guess, putting ourselves in that region of learning, might be a way of putting it. And so did you also already so this is a problem, and you sort of start to, I guess, work on a solution, and already just having a framework, or I guess is your starting point for solving it. And you also mentioned things like biomechanics and ways of measuring things. Was that important in these early days, or what was, like, the first initial maybe MVP of your business, or minimal viable product of your business?
Yeah, that was it. And actually, there was all these other aspects of sports science that we could tag on, but this was probably my big first learning in entrepreneurship, which was I was solving a problem, but I couldn't make it profitable. Okay. So I think people think golf professionals have all this money, and if you're in the top 100 in the world, yeah, you're earning a fortune. But these guys that I'm working with, they're earning, if they're lucky, £15,000-20,000 a year, and they're spending £15,000 to £30,000 a year traveling around Europe.
Yeah, okay.
So I had this area where the top 100 in the world, well, no one had heard of me, so they're not going to work with me. So I was working with the people below, and I was solving this problem, but I couldn't make it profitable. Like, I was charging them a small monthly fee, and my hourly rate was just terrible, and I couldn't scale it because I was the limiting factor there. Yeah. So that I sort of carried on doing that and working with these professionals for quite a few years, thinking, how am I going to make this work? How am I going to make this work? Yeah. And thinking, well, if one of them gets in the top 50, great, I've cracked the code. But actually, that led into Golf Inside the UK and the website I built, which is exactly the same concept, but a completely different business model, which I think is a critical issue, aspect for students to look at. The problem and the solution is the first part. Just because something fails, I think quite often, if you've got something of value, it's the business model which needs looking at.
That's interesting. So actually, that you must have benefited immensely from working with athletes, with like being able to help solve the problem. So that must have been really valuable. But then you hit this wall of, you can't actually pay the bills. And, so this problem of, I guess, cost effectiveness might be an issue. Like, so you can't actually pay yourself. You're really it costs more.
It's not a business.
Yeah,
it's not a business if you can't make money. And it's one of those that you can say, well, my aim isn't to make money, it's to help people, but you're shooting yourself in the foot, because if you can't have a profitable business, you can't develop the service, grow and improve it and help more people. So it's a real tricky balance. Trying to get that sort of margin.
Well, yeah, and so what I was thinking was, so you started with, well, one of the things that the students do in the course also is, at least I think it was week 3 we did it, where we focus on a beachhead market. So the very first customers that you'll try to, I guess, serve, and there are different strategies, and one can be working with a relatively small market segment or type of customer, and you started with people who are in that pro category. Is that right? And that's a pretty small. I guess it's a pretty small market.
Yeah.
But
Relative.
yeah, relatively speaking. Okay, and then and one of the things that I say is it's interesting because it also helps you build, like, well, the nice thing about having a beachhead is it helps you sort of work out if you're able to deliver a service that people want. So you learn a lot, and then
refine what you're delivering as well.
Yeah. It must change a little bit, I guess.
Yeah. And I made some mistakes, and applying the theory from a lab with beginners putting to professionals is a huge jump. And so I actually learned a lot that helped me reinforce, I suppose, the theory in some senses. So it was a really valuable experience, as much as it really wasn't profitable.
I'm curious, what was the issue there? So like from novices to experts, obviously there's a big difference, I suppose. But what was
one of the big things that I'd not really accounted for is if you look at periodization of training, you'd say, right, okay, well, we have this sort of off period, then we're going to maybe level up practice difficulty and practice variability. And if we take practice variability as a good example, because a lot of the idea is, well, let's do varied practice because we know it transfers better to other environments. But what I didn't take into account is actually when a professional golfer is playing, they're playing 5 hours a day, really challenging, huge amounts of variability. Okay. So actually outside that, what they need is a real stable structure with lots of reps. And I'd not factored in the I suppose the stress of the actual game to what needs to be balanced with the training. So one of my learnings now is, and it was actually came from the athletes going, I don't want to do varied practice. I just want to just hit balls over and over again. And I started to try and unpick this, and I was thinking, it makes sense now. Yeah, you should actually have a stable practice structure and allow the athlete to get grounding, and I suppose just sort of build self-efficacy as well within the skill. And all of that learning probably comes from the training environment. So that was just sort of one of the small things that I learned during the time doing that.
That's interesting. It's an interesting insight because, again, that in the motor learning world, a lot of the rage is how do we would, as you improve in skill, we would look to increase variability of conditions. And actually, at some point, your insight is that somehow also seems to be a problem as well. And so that's something I haven't really come across.
No, one day I'll get around to writing a little piece on it somewhere, hopefully. But no, I still love learning and do a little bit of research in Scalability. So that's essentially. Oh, sorry. I was going to say that's essentially.
Yeah, sorry. You go. Sorry.
Okay. That's that part, and then I suppose I had this 5-year period where I was still doing a little bit of this on the side. I was lecturing at Leeds Beckett. I started a PhD at Leeds University in biomedical science. And that ran for 5 years where I was doing these things and enjoying it. But I think everyone was like, well, what are you doing and where are you going and how's this tying together? And then I was 3.5 years into a part-time PhD when I suddenly had the idea of setting up golf inside a UK. So, I mean, I don't know if you want me to
yeah, tell me. So this first idea that you've talked about, you still haven't launched a website yet, but that was, and you also mentioned an app. So there was also another attempt already, which is kind of interesting, actually. So
you want me to talk you through the app business?
Yeah, tell me about the app. And it didn't work out, is that right? Or,
no, so I was...
I'd love to hear it then.
26, I was just finishing the Masters. I was coaching these professionals sort of with the Scalac program, and I was coaching the university team golf, and one of my players from the golf team left, graduated, and he rang me up and just said, "What do you think of online golf coaching?"
Okay.
Well, and I was like, "Well, it's terrible." He was like, "Well, why is it terrible?" I was like, "Well, we've got the issue that we don't know where the ball's going, and that's really important for coaching. Also, building practices and providing feedback for people is a problem." And he was like, "Well, could you solve these problems?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, we could." And I said, "Well, we'll get the player to put in information on one end, and we could use constraints-based practice the other end to try and sort of hone technique." And this was a phone call, and I said bye, and off we went. Two weeks later, he rang me up and he goes, "We're gonna start this business. Do you want to be a part of it?" And I was like, "What business?" Like, "We're gonna this golf app. We're gonna build it." And essentially, his dad had just come down from a quite a high up job and come off the board and wanted to start up his own thing and had a bit of capital. And his son Jay was keen to start up a business, so we embarked on setting up a golf coaching app. I was 26, so it's 9 years ago now. It's called Golf 1-to-1, and in 9 months,
is it?
Yeah, in 9 months we had this concept. We beta tested it with a few sort of players, and the idea was that anywhere in the world, you could be sat where you are. You could film your swing, face on down the line, answer some questions, press send. You got sent off to us and then servers of PGA pros sitting around the world who'd then provide a nice little lesson for you saying, "Hi, Dominic, you're struggling with swing, just need to improve your grip." Drag and drop a skills game, drag and drop a drill, and send it back to your phone for $9.99 in 24 hours. That was the service. And this was it was a great idea, and we had a free app that people could download to keep their stats. The other clever bit was I wrote a little algorithm that it would say, "Hi, Dominic, we see you're struggling with your putting. Do you fancy having a putting lesson?" So it had these thresholds to sort of measure performance.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, and essentially in 18 months, this went up. We raised £500,000 in capital, signed with IMG, and we went bankrupt. And they wasted all the money.
Sorry to laugh, but yeah.
Don't. It was absolutely fine. It was a terrible experience and the best experience I've ever had. And that experience really shaped what I view now and probably what I've built now, because we were burning through, I think, £14,000 a month on marketing without having a proper product, without having proper market fit. And I was involved in the coaching side, the build, hiring the professionals, building the platform, filming all these drills. But I didn't have control over the business. So that was one of these things that it wasn't successful. We had some really great ideas that came out of it. But it really shaped my sort of future understanding of building businesses.
So you learn a lot there, and the learning. So the key learning is somehow the business model was somehow flawed. There was some sort of aspect of so you were focused on more maybe the user side and making sure they had a good experience, but maybe there are other aspects that weren't like somehow.
There's 2 points to it, I think. The number one was we were just burning through so much money when we didn't need to. And I think when I look at what I've built now, it just keep the costs as low as possible for as long as possible.
I like it.
Only have stuff when you really need it. Hence why I've got bags under my eyes these days. So I'm now employing staff. The second point.
Staff, was that one of the things? Just so much money into staff, or sorry?
No. We're paying IMG. I'll probably get sued for this if this goes out. We're paying IMG 14 grand a month to do nothing, essentially. We're with IMG, which was helpful in terms of raising more capital. I can
bleep this out if you like.
It's fine. But that was one of the things. The other thing was there was this real critical moment in the business where we were with these app developers in London. And we had these two parts to build, with this real simple part, which was an app that people could take on the golf course and keep their stats, and it would give them information about their game. And we had this really complicated part, which was this online coaching platform, which needed HTML, it needed JavaScript, it needed to communicate all of these different things. And I remember this critical moment where the developer said, "We're going to build the simple part first and launch it, and then we can iterate and get feedback. And then we're going to build the coaching part second, because it's a bit more complicated and it's going to take us longer." And the directors of the company were like, no, we're not doing this. The coaching part is how we earn money. I want that sold first.
Okay.
And that, I can't say if it killed us, but what happened was we then had 14 months where we could have had customers coming on board to use our product for free. We could have been learning lots about them. We could have been building a brand with them using our app, and we didn't. And actually, when we flipped it around, we launched the app, and within 3 months we'd run out of money. So that was one of those things, again, I think, in terms of finding product market fit and iterating. It was a huge lesson that I learned then.
Okay. Yeah, so it's interesting because I can see how that decision could have been made sense at the time to focus on like the thing that is actually making money now, because that's sort of the only thing that you validated, I suppose. But then the app was actually that would have been successful potentially because it's scalable, or you just had so many lessons to learn in that process. And
it was interesting. The app was free and was never going to make money. It was almost like a loss leader, which we could have monetized. Whereas the only thing that would have made us money was selling lessons at $9.99. But it was weird because I think if we had a month extra on that free app, it would have been out, and we got to about 15,000 downloads in a few weeks. So, I mean, if we'd had that running for 6 months, and if you go to anyone for more money and you say we've got 500,000 users and we want to build X, they'll give you money. Whereas if you say, we've got 15,000 users, that's a very different pitch.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So like, actually the app one of the nice strategies could have been that the app would have created this pent up demand. I've heard it called, and you would have created more demand potentially. And
I think so. And learned about our audience and what they wanted, which would be huge.
Oh yeah, okay. So that the app actually is a chance also to learn from the user as well. Yeah.
And we would have had all this data pouring in about their golf game, and it would have been brilliant from a geeky sports science perspective. Just going, well, how are people creating their scores? And we could have had so many spin-offs from that.
Okay, so well, I did. One of the questions that came to mind there is like, so with my students, one of the first things they do actually is they need to form a team, and in the startup world, they often talk about hustlers, hipsters, and hackers. Have you ever heard that one before?
I haven't actually. No.
Yeah, it's this concept of having diversity in your team in terms of skills.
Yes. I don't know what those three are though.
Yeah, well, so the hustler is, I think, the businessman. So he's always trying to find customers, right? Or investors. And then the hipster is, I think, you in this scenario. Yeah. So, it's not just because of your fantastic t-shirt, but no, the hipster is, it's all about the idea is user design and like the experience, and then the hacker is the engineer. So there's the person who likes to code. Sounds like you actually might have been wearing multiple hats with this algorithm as well that you're developing.
I can code a little bit.
Yeah. So
but no, probably more.
Was there any sort of team diversity issues, or did you feel like you had a good team starting with that particular one, or was it like you just went too early?
It was interesting because I think that was my first experience. I'd been self-employed for years, but it was the first business experience, and you have nothing to compare it to.
Yeah. Okay.
You're so right. Now I've gone through a couple of different things. I kind of know who I'm trying to build and what skill sets I want.
Okay.
Whereas then it was just, well, this is it.
Yeah.
And I'd never had a framework as you'd explained. So the team was.
This is not the best framework in the world. But
The team was great, and I think one thing that I've done in businesses since, I've got a little sister site for the one that I have now in sports science, and one of the best things I did is we sat down and we worked out the values and we went through lots of what ifs.
Okay.
And I think that just ensures that you've got this criteria that when you come to a decision, you can go, well, let's look back at the criteria and make that. And that allows everyone to sort of be on the same page. And we didn't really have that because I didn't know what I was doing. I was just like, yeah, I'll join this app startup. And we had the two guys who were, I suppose, from the business perspective. And one of them had done very well in, I suppose, a classical retail business, but no experience in terms of the app and start world. And I think I put a bit too much trust in them going, they know what they're doing. That's the business side sorted. And I think if you look at that mistake maybe that we made, that is a classical change from 20th century business to what we see now in terms of the iteration and the development. So we didn't have any issues, but I think when I look back, there's probably some things that I wish we'd done a little bit differently.
Yeah, it's interesting. So like somehow the nature of businesses have changed. That seems that I read that I read that a lot as well, and primarily because of just the nature of technology, I guess these days, the way it's just becoming so fundamental to everything. And if you don't embrace it, I think there's that danger. So I tell the students, you're in danger of being disrupted somehow if you don't have a technology basis. And it's also interesting, that comment about alignment, team alignment being important. So how do you achieve? We haven't actually talked about UK golf yet. And did that start with a team, or was that just primarily with yourself and you had a vision?
Yes. So this was app finished, 3-year dip, most of the way through my PhD.
Okay.
I was ahead of schedule at this point, I suppose. And
in the PhD or? With
a PhD, part-time. So I was sort of still working with these pros just for fun, because it wasn't a business. It was, a bit of extra money each month. And I was actually getting my hair cut one day, and I picked up a golf magazine because I never read them, but I was there and I opened it, and it was the worst advice I'd ever seen. And it was just wrong. It was just so wrong. And I was just thinking, oh dear Lord, I can't believe golfers are still being fed this by magazines. And I just finished lecturing at Leeds Beckett in sports science and moving across to Leeds Uni to do more clinical work on my PhD. And so I just thought, well, you know what? I've got a few extra hours a week. I don't have many friends, luckily. I've got a few extra hours. Why don't I just build a sports science and golf coaching site? And it's going to be really nerdy. It's going to be for 1% of people, but it's going to keep my interest up, and it's going to allow me to, write. So I set it up, and what I did is actually wrote 3 articles over 3 weeks I'd scribbled out, and I put each one on Reddit, on a subreddit, golf. And so one was around deliberate practice, one was around sort of these sort of how to build practices. And I think the third one I got about 6,000 reads in 12 hours. And I suddenly thought, God, there's something here. So within a week, I then decided to build a website, and I called it Golf Insider UK. Just stealing really like Business Insider and these other things.
Nice.
Golf Insider had gone. So built Golf Insider, and I spent about a week in the evenings just learning how to use WordPress, building a site. And that was really the genesis of Golf Insider UK, which was, let's just build really great content around golf performance, around skill acquisition and coaching.
So I guess the MVP of Golf Insider was really a website about, I guess, science applied to golf, I suppose. This might be one way to say it.
It really is. The best way to sum it up is what I wish I'd had when I was a 13-year-old kid trying to become a golf professional. So whenever I'm thinking about content or where we're going, it's like, would this have been useful to me as a 13-year-old kid?
Okay, that's interesting. So like you're that's funny. So last week we talked in my course. We built something called a persona. This is your end user, and who is actually, you imagine it's a real person. And so yourself as a 13-year-old is your persona. Would that be? Is that fair?
I thought it was. Actually, since I've got more data and I realise it's not quite me, but that's not a bad framework, and I can explain why if you'd like.
Yes, please. Absolutely.
So I thought I was building a website for probably more elite players, and that was really my target.
Okay.
And as I've got all these lovely comments that come in from people who are using it all across the world, I've realized I'm not targeting elite users. I'm targeting all golfers, but what they have in common is they all want to understand stuff. So I have lots of engineers, lots of teachers, lots of scientists, and it's that analytical type of individual. And I've got some people who are probably close to my demographic, like people who are in the Russian squad for golf, who are reaching out, and people running junior academies in Indonesia. But then I also have a lot of people who are 30 to 50 and golf's their passion, and they have a job, but they just want to know how to get better in their spare time.
Are these people 30? Would they? Because I have mused about. I don't play golf, but are they starting golf for the first time, the 30, 50-year-olds, or?
Yeah, some of them. I get some lovely emails. I had a message a couple of weeks ago from a lady in Sweden who just retired, and she just started golf, and she'd had golf lessons, which commonly happens. Here's how to hold a golf club. Here's how to swing. And no idea how to play and practice. Like that doesn't seem to enter the realm of golf coaching for some reason. So again, that's sort of one of the problems that I'm trying to solve there. Is here's how to practice. Here's some games you can play on the golf course.
Interesting. Yeah, well, it's another thing that what you've mentioned that's interesting is so I talked about this beachhead earlier on, and the nice thing, I guess, of course, we're not at this point, we're not really talking about a beachhead anymore. It's really you've got I assume actually multiple types of users and people who are interested, but that idea that they all have in common this sort of interest to understand more, and that must be a nice thing, because one of the qualities apparently of a good beachhead is that if your business in some way involves technology or something like that, is that they should be technology enthusiasts.
Right. Obviously.
Yeah. So
Knitting Weekly probably has taken off now, but it probably didn't 20 years ago.
Sorry, what's that? The
knittingweekly.com probably didn't take off 20 years ago, but now it's probably something, isn't it?
Yeah, there are some people who are prepared to get their information through that medium now. So so somehow you've got the perfect kind of people who are you've got this sort of perfect kind of customer segment somehow in that way.
So.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. So you started with information, but there's more things now. It must have evolved from. So it's evolved from, you realize there are people interested in this information. You probably weren't making money out of it initially, right? You just saw that there was interest.
Yeah, it took 9 months. 9 months to earn money. Yeah. And again, I think that's one of those.
Customer, was it, or
no?
Yeah.
So this is the wonderful thing about technology, and getting back to business models is you've got all of these different models which just didn't exist. So when you look back at the professionals I was working with, it was I'll write a practice plan and you pay me X, and that's a very simple, I suppose, service or product. It depends how you want to look at it.
Like time for service. Yes. Yep.
Whereas all of a sudden the internet opens up all of these different avenues and business models. So when I first started, I'd learn a few lessons, and I think the principles I could give you to start was, number one, keep costs as low as possible. It was my own time, and I think I spent about £100 setting up Golf Insider, and that was my cost for the first year. And then the second one was one traffic source and one monetization strategy.
Okay.
So I sat there and I was thinking, I could do this and I could do this and I could do all these things. And I just thought, right, I'm just going to focus on one traffic source and one monetization strategy.
What's a traffic source? Sorry, Will.
So online, it's how are you going to get people to you? So I suppose in the physical world, you'd think, how are people coming to your shop? Now, you've really got to view the internet or any digital business as the same way. How are you going to get people to you? And you could do paid ads, you could do social media, which is obviously very separate. You could break down social media to Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook, or you could do SEO, which is really the method that I chose. So
What's sorry, what's
SEO
well.
SEO is search engine optimization,
Oh yeah,
and it's
okay.
really looking at how you rank in Google.
Mhm.
But it has these two huge benefits, which is number one, if you can get on the first page of Google for a search term, it's a lot of work, so it's not free, but you're not paying a lot to be there.
Yeah,
And secondly, and this is the critical point, is the way to do SEO is you start with keyword research. So you see what are people typing into Google that there isn't information. So straight away, it gives you this huge source of problems that people are searching for.
yeah.
And to give you a quick example, there are 4,000 searches each month for how to hold a golf club.
Okay.
Now,
yeah.
I would talk about it as a golf grip, but suddenly realizing that the language people are using is how to hold a golf club is fascinating and allows me to write content around that.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
I took SEO as the main strategy and saying, right, I'm just going to build this up as my main traffic source. I had an email list, but that was the main way I was getting traffic.
Yeah.
And then the monetization strategy, which I decided to settle on, was display ads. So there's a company, Mediavine, still work with them. They're a fantastic ad company.
Okay.
And I realized that if I get to 30,000 reads a month, 1,000 a day, I could put ads on my site. And I don't like ads. I hate ads, actually. But it meant that I could provide all of this information for free for the user. And I could just write about it. And they could have access to it. And it was exactly the same as what I was doing with the professionals earlier. But this was a really different business model. Free to them. There were some ads. I got paid to produce this content.
Yep.
So that was the first monetization strategy.
Okay. Yeah, and like I guess the interesting thing, there's a few interesting points or lessons maybe is like you didn't try to do everything. you focused.
They were in here. All the thoughts were in here, and I had to keep pushing them down. Yeah.
You really had to be disciplined with focus. Okay.
Yeah, and that was a huge learning point.
Okay. Well, yeah. And this actually, I think another way we talk about traffic sources as a term is, I think, market channel or the customer channel, I think they call it as well. And the search engine optimization approach is interesting because you actually, at the same time, you're also learning what people, what they want, actually, and that must help. And then you also learn what their language is a bit as well, because you might have a different lexicon actually from that your people who are interested in your content somehow. That's
really interesting. And doing this sort of sports science project, which is we won't get on to, but it's sort of a smaller version of what I'm doing now. Again, it's fascinating to know what people are searching for around sports science. So I mean, that's a different conversation in itself. But yeah.
Yes. Oh, so you're doing it. Sorry. So you're doing a sports science project as well. That's
where this is evolving is Golf Insider is going great. But within about 2 years ago, I was like, oh, there needs to be this sports science version of this, which is not the rubbish you find on Brian Mac.
Again, I can delete it if you want, but
not an academic journal, but it's that student just going, oh, okay, what is Degrees of Freedom? And please tell me what this is, and then also direct me to some useful literature. So that's sort of a site, but it's all of the skill set I've learned through Golf Insider. So I think we'll talk through it at the end if you want to know more about where that's going.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because one of the things that's kind of interesting is like you mentioned, called it a kind of spin-off in a way, and it's also maybe you talk about like as you scale and as you grow, you businesses tend to also go into adjacent markets, or they call them follow-on markets. So you kind of tweak a little bit, maybe the nature of your product in order to do that. And which is of course a nice way to continue to grow and develop.
Yes.
And and you've kind of, I guess you must, because again, you must have had, as you said, tons of ideas, and this is the one that makes maybe the most sense as the next idea, maybe.
It's a bigger market. It means I don't have to do with the golf stuff. I'm a bit precious sometimes because I'm like, I don't want other people to write certain aspects, and that's been a big thing that I need to get over.
Okay.
Whereas in sports sciences, I just know there's lots of people better than me. So we've got a tutor for British weightlifting writing around your weightlifting and other bits.
Okay, nice.
Great. I'm not going to write about that. So, and we've got a great physiologist writing around physiology and epoch, and it's like, great. I'm not going to touch that with a stick. Yeah, you write the best content. So yeah, perfect. It was one of them. But there's a lot of alignment with the systems and processes. Building a website, keyword research, monetization strategies. I sort of understand now.
Yeah. Okay.
And I was like, oh, this is a real exciting opportunity. So that's
you've kind of, there's a lot of aspects of your business model that can remain more or less the same, and it's just a kind of, I mean, obviously the content and website will be different, but yeah, that's nice. Yeah, and somehow really efficient as well.
Well, so that's my 1 day a week. This is Tuesday when we're doing this interview. That's my Sports Science Insider day, and then I have 4 or 5 days a week when I'm working on Golf Insider. So it's sort of just, that's my structure of a week at the moment.
So I'm kind of I'm interfering with this startup as we speak.
As I said, Tom, this is something I'm passionate about, and I enjoy talking about. So I mean, I'll get a lot out of this as well. Just sort of
well, actually, it's kind of interesting. This second business now actually is like, well, of course they're both very interesting. Sounds like you've gathered together a team of people at the university. Is that correct? Or
yeah. So as I had about 1.5 years left of my PhD where I thought of this idea, and I just thought, no, we'll just again discipline, focus on Golf Insider, grow that, and then come back to this after the PhD is done, which was only a few months back. I finally finished that.
Okay.
But I was trying to look for someone to do it with, and there was a student that she's a mature student, and she'd helped me with my PhD project when she was first year. I'd spent 6 months in an office with her in the last year that I was writing up, and I knew she had the qualities of someone that I would work with, which was enthusiastic, very trustworthy, and passionate. Perfect. But she also had the qualities. So I'm very creative. I will start a project now and get it 80% finished and get really excited with that. Terrible at finishing off and the fine details and other bits. Sure. And she is very good at going, oh, this isn't right, there's a spelling mistake there, this is this. Okay. And so she's a great fit for me.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
So yeah, that was, and it was someone that I thought, I was like, wow, we spent a long time in office together. I know I could work with that.
Okay.
So yeah.
So this is a scenario you've started with a team almost, and you've to some extent, and it's I might be characterizing it wrongly.
We started us two. Spark, who I must give a huge shout out to, who are entrepreneurial centre at University of Leeds. Okay. I just said,
what's this? Sorry, it's a university.
Spark,
sorry, yeah.
University of Leeds is where I was doing my PhD, and Spark is there to help people set up businesses, and they run courses. They've got mentors that you can go and see, and they also run competitions for the business plan and other pieces. And I just said they put me in a tech incubator for Golf Insider UK and supported me through that. And then I'd set up this other one. I just said, look, is there any competitions we could enter for a small amount of funding? And they were brilliant. They said, well, fill in this proof of concept form, and we'll see what we can do. And you can apply for £500 to £1,000 of funding. Okay. And so we filled in this proof of concept and said, well, look, here's what we're doing. Here's how we'd like to spend some money to test this out. And they gave us almost £1,000 just to do it. So that gave us the money to then recruit some writers and start to build at a faster pace. And my God, they're amazing. And I tell all the University of Leeds students about it, and about 1% go through. But free money to set up a business is something that just doesn't exist in the real world. So I mean, it's just staggering service from the university.
Yeah. So one of the we, of course, I think lots of universities are doing it now. So they have incubators, I guess might be one way to call them. And yeah, their goal is to see, they want students or people associated with the university to start a business and be successful. And yeah, they give these, it's like no strings attached funding, isn't it? So they don't want the money back. They just want you to be successful. Yeah. Which is perfect. And so Spark, I'll do an intro and I'll make sure I give them a shout out.
Yeah.
And And look, these one of the lessons for students is like these resources. It's funny that they're around, and if this is something you're interested in, it might be that's the only reason you end up seeing it. And so part of how do you actually notice something if you're not interested?
That you're not looking for.
Yeah, if you're not looking, and so one of the goals of the course is, of course, is to increase that awareness and just to open your eyes to the opportunity that's out there at the university. So there's a lot of resources that we can tap into. Yeah. So that's nice. So and you know, I suppose I also think that universities are really nice partners to start businesses with, because
definitely
again, their goal is pretty altruistic. It's usually just to see you succeed, isn't it?
And the synergy is there. You've got people with skills who want a job, and so it should be a great relationship between the two. And I fully intend to keep working with universities as I grow these, because they've been good to me, and it's just, as you say, a wonderful partnership.
It's I think you mentioned it's this idea of win-win. It's definitely win-win.
So I don't know where you want to go. I could talk you through sort of the progression of Golf Insider and where that's gone.
How long have we been talking for? Okay, so we've been going for
an hour. I mean, I'm fine for time, so don't you worry. You know, my end, it's fine.
Well, I also don't want to over fatigue you either, and but
that's fine.
We can start to So I think what's interesting is because you've only really touched the surface of where you started to realize it was something that could be successful, isn't it, with Golf Insider? And so and that was through, I guess, creating information that was perhaps digestible, that people wanted, and you learned, you had a way of learning that, and then so that's where we got to, I think. And then you start to scale, or you start to, I guess, refine. Is that how
it blew up without me trying to make it blow up. It just went poof, and I was having 5,000-6,000 reads a day, and the ad revenue was coming in. I was doing my PhD. I still had some teaching responsibilities, and it was really successful without me even knowing why it was successul. I just tried to do some SEO stuff, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is off." And then after a few months, Google changed their algorithm, and it dipped, and it was suddenly back down to not being successful. And it was one of those things. I was like, "Oh my god, what do I do now?" You're still earning some money, but probably a fifth of what it was a month earlier. And it was one of those real lessons in business volatility. But essentially, then it was from that point where it dipped back down. It gave me a nice buffer of income that had come in, because I wasn't spending it, to say, right, I've now got 6 months runway to sort of take on this business. I spent another 9 months finally finishing my PhD, which I needed to do, and got that handed in. And then I've been running it for the last 6 months, I suppose, since finishing my PhD, and growing it. So at a high level, traffic's probably gone up about 2.5 times from when I've moved on to it full time, which is sort of more content and just trying to improve what's already out there. And I suppose the different ways or revenue streams at the moment is there's ad revenue, which is one part. Another part of it is affiliate income, which is when you sort of sell products and services and receive a fee. And so that's sort of, if you're talking about, there's lots of best X for Y. So it'd be best golf clubs for beginners, or best running shoes for trail running. These things are out there.
Nice.
So it's that type of content. And then it's selling products and services. So I created a little performance diary, which is really just what I wish I'd had again, of just saying, right, let's just what we're doing each week and let's track it. And so it's just scaling that, and the whole time, and where I want to be in 5 years is just the best online golf performance site. So it's growing the content into audio. There's a podcast just come out, and more video stuff, because that's the way the world's heading.
Interesting.
developing these products and services, and just keep growing, just trying to think what's the best content we can create for people who want to get better at golf.
Yeah. Again, like there just must be so many lessons you've learned just in at these new revenue models or sources of revenue. So like how to work with affiliates and developing a product service, like actually shipping product to people must have been a crazy lesson as well, I guess.
Yeah, I did that through KDP, which is part of Amazon, where if you upload a template of a book and you check it's fine, and then essentially if anyone around Europe orders a book, it gets printed in Poland and sent to them, and I don't see it. It just comes up that you've earned, I mean, I don't know, I learned like $4 per book. But it's just this bizarre, but again, I think one of the things for the students these days is the world is more competitive than ever in terms of a job market, but it's never been easier to start a business and earn money. You've got all of these, I don't need to stock 20,000 books now. They can get printed on demand. And so these ideas for sports scientists and sports coaches, I think it's a really exciting time to come out into the world.
Yeah, and like it's part of it is like just starting somewhere, and then you can build off. Once you've got something that people enjoy, you can build off that somehow. It's interesting.
Yeah, and that's, I think, one of the lessons for students, which I know is the last part we'll get into, but when you're trying to solve a problem, it's absolutely fine to fail with your concept. Just make sure it's not a fatal failure. Make sure you don't run out of money or someone dies.
Okay.
As I think those sort of failures are more sort of falling forwards and iterations of the product to get it to somewhere. And quite often your solution is correct. You're solving a problem, but maybe the business model or the strategy is wrong. I think that's one of the lessons I've learned in the last 10 years trying to do this.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I think this is really the third iteration or business model really for the problem, but the problem's been the same.
Okay. Yeah. And which is a good thing. If you're able to, it means the problem is a good problem. And this idea of taking like I guess educated or acceptable levels of risk, not just like I'm just going to throw the house at this or something like that. So you only sort of bet what you're willing to lose. Maybe it might be a way of thinking about it. Yeah.
And it's a really important point. I think people view business as risky, spending lots of money. I think great business is actually really mitigating that risk and just going, what's the cheapest way we can test this out? And what's the quickest way we can learn? Because time is valuable as well.
Yeah, it's mitigating risk. So like, do you
want me to give you an example of that?
Yeah. So mitigating risk, it sounds like there's something uncertain, there's uncertainty, and you need to learn something to make sure your hunch is correct or not correct. Is that how it works? Or?
So my brother-in-law lives in Hong Kong, and he's adamant he wants to start a business. I don't know why. He's a great interior designer. He does very well for himself. He's into going to the gym, and he really thinks a product should exist for protein balls, which are made from organic stuff.
Okay. All right.
And he was ringing me up discussing this idea, and he goes, well, I want this, and I prefer this than this, and I'm going to ring a company and get them to produce these with these products. It was getting to like £20,000. And I said to him, I was like, Ollie, can you buy this ingredient? He's like, yes. I was like, buy it, make 20, give them to your friends. If they say, can we have some more? And they're willing to pay you $2 per ball, you've got a business.
Yeah, okay, perfect, yeah.
That is the way to test that idea, not spend £20,000 shipping this product. And that is just something that I see over and over again. People often have an idea, but are stuck how to try it. And trying it in the cheapest, bare bones way is the best, because even if it's not the finished product, you learn so much about the next step.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's perfect. Great lesson. It's that phrase or that term. Maybe you've read that lean startup. Have you ever heard of that book before and those concepts? Yeah. So iterative iterative design, I think they might call it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like you're scaling up, and you're sort of you're offering new services, and you're actually entering adjacent markets and follow-on markets. So it sounds like you're definitely on your way, Will. And yeah,
Well.
yeah. And it's interesting. So I suppose you must also perform. Well, I'll start wrapping it up. I'll start pushing, maybe closing things up, and letting you get on with your business.
Oh, it's fine. As I said, it's good fun. So
yeah.
whatever you want to ask, please ask. It's more than enough time.
Well, it's funny. So like you get to also play. So we talk about making experiments with. One of the funny insights is we can experiment with our product or service, but you also, of course, experiment with your business model. So
yes,
you talk about the number of people who visit your site. You potentially go through, okay, if I do this, will that increase more people? And there's some sort of experiment you're kind of performing when you do that, I suppose. Is that an accurate way of putting it?
Yeah, I think, again, another thing that I've learned, which I'd never read anywhere, but it's really similar to the sports performance idea, which is, well, can you build just the most basic deterministic model to explain how your business works? And that's what I do with athletes. It's just like, here's the factors, lower these, performance goes up, or increase these, performance goes up. So for me and the content sites, it's really simple. It's how many thousand people am I getting to the site, and how much revenue do I make per 1,000 people?
Okay.
And so you've got two ways to increase profitability: more people or more revenue per 1,000. So they're the things that I track each month.
Okay.
And you can then dive in deeper. But I think you can get really lost in business doing stuff that's not important to growing. And so coming back to those two metrics, really important. I can't remember the rest of the question. It was,
well, the point is that, like, so it sounds like you're tracking that you've got the key things that I guess either confirm or reject your hypothesis when you perform an experiment, and this is what you're going to base whether or not you're successful or you need to go back to it.
And again, it just comes back to being a good scientist, which is just keeping data. So I know where my traffic's coming from. I know through Google, sort of at the back end where you're ranking, what search terms you're ranking for, and you can work on them. So each month it's just sort of sitting down and just going, what's the logical step to growth? There's some challenges. So mine, we've got mainly written content, and I've got to jump to video.
Okay.
Now I'm employing a videographer. I've got to come up with a content strategy, and it's a long time to profitability, because I can't just put it on YouTube and have thousands of people there. So I think now and again in a business, that's again one of those risks. And it's, how can you mitigate that risk to test this hypothesis that I know video content is the future, and I know I can monetize this in the future, but how long is it going to take me to get there, and how much is it going to cost me to get that profitability, that part of the business? So that's one of the challenges I've got in the next 2-3 months.
Yeah, it's interesting. So like that question of how long will you know if you're right or wrong is kind of, so, because of course you can be wrong, and you want to know as quickly as possible in a way. So, and
I could be wrong because the content was wrong, or the way it was produced was wrong, or it doesn't solve the problem. So but again, that is where you just need to get feedback from people. And luckily with online businesses, you get a lot of data. So on YouTube, you can see when people fall off a video and stop watching, which is a fascinating graph to watch on any content. And you can go, what did I say there that made everyone switch off? Or so again, but I think it comes back to being a great scientist actually has some great synergies with starting a business, because it is hypothesis testing, it's using data, and it's just thinking logically through problems. And it's great fun. It really is.
You made me worried to look at the analytics of this YouTube.
1 minute just off.
Yeah. Well, I did. So I posted I posted a few for my students, and they said they accelerated through. So it's not like they watch it in a linear fashion at this point, but yeah. So, and that hopefully that doesn't discourage you. But, yeah, I do the So I at least do time stamping. So
right, yeah,
I feel like I'm doing half the. I'm trying to meet them halfway with my
Oh, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Better than lectures.
Yeah. Well, the courses it's workshop based actually. So
Nice.
I do primers, like a 1 hour primer, and then we do workshops. So even the primers, I get scared now to look at the data there now too. So. But no, they're doing well. They're doing quite well. So they're really picking up the concepts, I think. So anyway, all right. Well, again, look, a lot of lessons learned here, I think, and your business is quite unique to the others I've talked to, in that it's seems like you've built it around a website. And so that's quite unique compared to everyone else I've talked to. Yeah. And so a lot of interesting things to learn there, I think. And look, lots of lessons learned across, I guess, all the different aspects of the business model. So I might wrap up and push into the final section, Will.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah. So the final section would be, it might be simply distilling what we've already talked about into like maybe 1 or 2 key points or nuggets for students in exercise science, interested in business. It could even be just trying to start a startup, or what the next steps might be, or what are the key lessons or things to think about in this early phase. How could we get to some points there? What would you say?
Yes, I suppose there's a couple. The first thing is, I think, in the digital age, is to reassess what your role is as an exercise scientist. So, for my own domain, I'm a golf coach. I give golf lessons, but that's not really the problem. The problem is people want to get better at golf. They don't want golf lessons. Mm-hmm. So as soon as you view it like that, you suddenly see, oh, I don't have to give a golf lesson. I can write content. I can produce, a practice diary. I can do this. I can talk about that with another. These are all useful things. And I think for exercise scientists, it's to really think, okay, there's this problem that I'm interested in solving. It could be better nutrition and hydration. It could be improve rock climbing capabilities. It's how could you solve that problem? And what may that look like that you haven't thought of already? So I think that's one thing where you can suddenly sit down and spin off a lot of different ideas around what already exists. The second, sorry.
I like that. So problem focused, and you go on with your next one, and I might wrap up. I don't want to interrupt your thought.
Okay. The second one, I think, which is really important if anyone is actually going to go and do this, is most people you see who want to set up a business do everything that they think is involved in setting up a business. They'll buy business cards, they'll design a logo, they'll buy the domain. And what a business is it's solving a problem, providing value, and making that profitable.
Yep.
That's it.
Okay.
So I think I don't care what you call your business or what you do. It's that second part. If you do that, everything else you can solve at a later point.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, I've done that myself.
You see it all the time.
Yeah. Sure. That's a really nice, succinct way to put it. So solve a problem in a way people want and make it profitable.
And you've got to make it profitable, because if you're losing money, it's not sustainable and you can't keep solving problems. So it's not like you're trying to do a Jeff Bezos and steal all of the world's wealth and put it in your own pocket. But you've got to have money to keep growing and keep developing and keep helping people. So it's a fine balance.
Yeah, well, they say he created a virtuous cycle himself, where it was like it just started with books, and now it's everything.
Yes.
So
But
yeah,
he had that sort of idea of, well, this is a very new way of looking at getting books to people.
yeah,
And I think as sports scientists, we can go, well, what are we trying to solve, and what's a new way that we can look at doing that? So
yeah. Yeah, and so like it is interesting. So technology can be leveraged now to solve problems in new ways, and that's already the genesis of a potentially a business. And then of course in universities you've got these resources lying around, or there's people around. So if you can build that team, the people you trust and share, I guess, a passion for that, then you might be onto something already. And also, I guess, don't be afraid. Actually, learn from your, I guess, failures, and don't fail too hard, by the sounds of ththings. But
yeah, as long as they're not critical, they're all learning experiences.
okay.
You don't learn anything when you succeed. You just carry on doing what you're doing. As soon as you fail, you learn something new.
There is one final question that we never really talked about somehow, was actually, which is interesting, is that we don't, somehow it's not, doesn't seem critical, but it must be, is there's also, of course, competition. So, there's other people who are trying to solve that problem. How do you think about competition? Is it like, how do you frame that for you, for your business, for example? Is it, do you try to just focus on what you're doing? Is it maybe you turn competitors into collaborators? I mean, what sort of, do you have a framework for that at all? I don't know.
Yeah, I do. I probably reassess it every year. So it's one of those things, if you keep focusing on what other people are doing, you just don't get your own work done. But you have to have that sit back reflection and then go. So I've got two areas of maybe more, but in a basic sense, you've got sort of established golf magazines, which are now online, have huge amounts of content that they churn out, huge sites.
Yeah.
And then you have trashy, horrible, bad advice sites who are making a fortune because they're great at SEO.
Okay.
And I feel like I'm against both these people. So if you type in, I gave the example of best golf clubs for beginners, you'll see a website ranking first. The content's written by someone that never plays golf. That website, just judging it, they're earning £20,000-30,000 a month through affiliate income across their site. They're generating huge amounts of money. And so part of my battle is, well, how do I provide better golf value for golfers and outrank these people? Because I don't want golfers buying bad equipment. And then on the other side, it's these golf magazines, they're good and they're certainly a competitor and worthwhile competitor. But what can I do that is different to them or unique? And there's two things. Number one, again, I've got more of a sports science slant, and hopefully I'm quite good as a golf coach, so I can hopefully provide better value from that sense. But the other big value, and this is something which is more transferable for students, is I'm small. I have a very small team of freelancers that I'm growing, but it allows me to make decisions that they can't, because they are constrained by having this huge overhead of staff each month. So they had to churn out a lot of information. They are restricted. They can't try new things as easily. So I look at that as an advantage. And really, as a smaller business, I'm more adaptable and I can change to different sort of conditions in the market. So they're probably my main sources of competitors online. But with that, I just try and make as many friends as possible. The more people I can be friends with, it's just beneficial. So if there's anyone that's doing good stuff online, I just reach out and just say, you're doing great content. Long term, I'd love to have something back, but I don't care. It's just build friends. I've never found that to be harmful.
Okay, that's perfect. Yeah, so it's like, heard it phrased once, like there's like, you can't have a bad conversation somehow. Like, So
students of this are saying otherwise, probably. But
Well, let's hope they change their mind after hearing that quote. But and so like again, you just never know if as long as you're genuine in your conversations and your approach, you just never know when it will pay dividends.
No.
And I suppose that seeing yourself as having an advantage for the being, I guess, smaller and more agile somehow gives you that some advantage to maneuver and adapt is a nice idea. And maybe you saw some of that in COVID. I don't know if that was a feature at all of COVID for you, but actually, yeah. So
it was. Dear Lord, how do I cut as many costs as possible? Because last April was all of a sudden everything dropped by 70% in terms of income, and it was like, wow, what's going to happen? But yeah, that was one of those situations where it was me next day, get up, scribble everything down, costs, get rid of.
yeah. Okay.
And whereas if you've got 60 staff, it's
a
horrible decision to say we're going to start making people redundant.
Yeah.
So there's for every disadvantage you can turn it into advantage, I think, as a business.
Yeah, that's a nice way to think about it. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. Okay, well, I think we, again, just covered a lot of ground there. So some great insights. I don't think there's any, I guess there's always a final question I like to ask, which is, do you have any questions or final comments, questions for me, or perhaps about the course, or any final comment that you'd like to make, just to wrap it up? Yeah, it can be a tough one.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? I think, hopefully there's some insight. It's only my story, so it feels quite normal to me. But I suppose hopefully it's useful for your students. What's the most interesting thing that we've covered for your students? I suppose that would be my thing to you.
Well, I hope one of the things that there's a lot of interesting insights in the conversation, and one of the important lessons, I think, is it's not just about your product or service. Of course, it's very important, and the problem that you solve, but there's also that business model as well, and there's that they're all somehow linked in a way.
Yeah.
So because, of course, one of the traps is that we can, well, again, it's really important to do, is just to focus on iterating and on the features of the product. But there's all these other aspects that are can potentially be even more important. So like focusing on the problem of the customer and really understanding that, as opposed to just how can I, for example, with an app, how can we just build all these features into an app until it's this big and then launch it, as opposed to
don't do that, please.
Yeah. I mean, I've certainly gone down that road myself. So the value of that lesson is I think it's invaluable somehow. So
yeah.
And look, I mean, there's again just lots of lessons to be learned about the relationship between your business model and your product service and that sort of thing.
Certainly.
Yeah. From my point.
I've enjoyed it. It's been really nice to have a chat.
Yeah. Look, it's been fantastic. So so thank you again on behalf of.
Pleasure.
I'll shut the recording off now. Okay. All right. Good on you.